So we're going to start looking at human hair and how you identify how you identify different types of it, different hairs. So you lose about 50 to 100 hairs every day from approximately 100,000 total hairs on your head. Everybody has a different amount, but this is just an average. So as you move around throughout the day, you leave a trail of hairs that can help tell where you've been. And if you have short hair, maybe you don't notice it so much, but if you have longer hair, you can probably pick out and even find the trail of where you've been a lot easier. So this means that anywhere you go, you can actually leave a trail of hair behind without noticing it. This also means that a suspect could be identified by what hair they've left behind at a crime scene. So, what do you look for? You're going to actually be trained, and you guys got to pay attention to very specific features on the human hair. You're going to be able to identify a suspect based on a hair sample left at a crime scene. This is considered class evidence because you can actually have hair that looks similar to somebody else's. For example, like somebody else can have the same shade of hair color. Maybe you have the same specific characteristics as like your mom or somebody close to you. So these are all things that you're going to have to take into account. So one person might have several different looking hairs actually too. Because you can have a mixture of hair on your head. You might not all have the same shade. You might have blonde hairs, and you might have gray hairs, and you might have brown hairs, and you might actually have some red hairs in there too. So for this reason, it's recommended that up to 30 hairs from a suspect be observed when trying to match hair. This also is why it's class evidence instead of individualized evidence. So human evidence is used as evidence in two ways. The suspect's hair found at the crime scene, or it's found on victim's clothes, or the victim's hair is found on the suspect's clothes or belongings. Whoops. So it's used as evidence because it is found in accordance to the two people, whoever the victim and the perpetrator are. It's found on their belongings. If a hair is found with a root attached, it becomes very special evidence because you can actually get DNA from the root. So you have to have a good sample, but and by that I mean a large piece attached, a large portion of the root attached, in order for you to do DNA fingerprinting. But otherwise, if you just have the hair itself and no root, then it can't be used for DNA. So hair can be used to determine if a person has used drugs as well within the past several months. So the drug chemicals actually become embedded in the structure of the hair. And so as long as your hair it's a record of the possible drug use that may have occurred during that time. So humans of European ancestry often have oval or round hair shafts. Humans of Asian ancestry also, they often have large round hair shafts. And humans of African ancestry often have flattened hair shaft, and this is why it's curly. So the hair shaft is like where it comes out of your skin. And so if you're thinking of somebody from European descent, whether you're Irish or Italian or whatever, those people have oval around. So oval can lead to a little bit of a curl or a wave in your hair, whereas round hair shafts wind up very straight. And Asian people, people with Asian ancestry, have large round hair shafts, meaning that their hair is often very straight. And then humans of African ancestry, this is why they have quite often very curly hair, because if they have flattened hair, it actually curls. So these are 3 different types of hair underneath a microscope. And you can see different characteristics, and this is we'll show you what you're supposed to be looking for within these to kind of tell the difference between the hair. So the hair shaft you see through the microscope is made up of dead, dried up layers filled with keratin protein. And there are 3 different distinct layers. There's the cuticle, which is the outer layer, the thin layer of cells covering the outside of your hair. There's the cortex, a layer of dead cells that make up the majority. And then there is the medulla. The medulla they're a layer of dead cells and spaces that runs down the middle of the center of the hair, and some hair samples will not actually have a medulla. Apparently my screen was not big enough to catch that bottom portion, so I kind of zoomed out for you guys. So general hair observations. So we have the 3 different layers. Some do not have a medulla. So this is a very good example of like the layers that you'll find in a hair. So medulla is the space that runs up the center. And the cuticle is that outside layer that kind of splits or breaks off when you have split ends. And then the cortex is the center portion, kind of the meat of the hair follicle, or the hair itself. And you can see here on the drawing how the cuticle is the outer, the cortex is the in-between, and the medulla is the strip. It's like this darkened strip that runs down the center. And you can see here in this hair sample, you can see the cuticle very easily. You can see the cortex is in here, but you don't even see a medulla running up the center. This one does not have a medulla, while this one very clearly does. So this is your medulla here. And then here would be the cuticle running along the outside, and the cortex is the space in between. So the cuticle is a thin layer of dead cells covering the outside of your hair. To see the cuticle scale pattern of your hair, you need to use a high-power microscope. There are 3 types of cuticle patterns. So there's imbricate, and this is kind of random. And then there's spinous, and these are very pointy. And then there's coronal, and they are rings. They are ring-like scales that look like little cups. So we're going to look at the 3 different types. So this is the imbricate. You can see how they're irregularly shaped, and how they don't form a very specific pattern. And then you can see this is an actual magnification of a hair, and you can see how on the actual magnification of the hair it's the same way. They're very irregular. They don't form a very specific pattern. This is spinous, and these look like little arrows to me. They look like little pointy spikes, but they're all facing the same direction. And this is an actual magnification of a hair with the spinous cuticle. And then here we have the coronal. And coronal, it looks like you've stacked cups inside of each other. They just look like you just stacked a whole bunch of them. And you can see here how that's the case on this hair. It's just, it very much looks like you stacked objects. Whether it's, I mean, it looks a lot like cups sitting inside of each other. So the cortex is a layer of dead cells that make up the majority of human hair. When you look at the cortex, it looks like the color of your hair. So colors include white, clear, light yellow, medium yellow, light brown, medium brown, dark brown, black, red, or orange. And so these are the colors that you'll, like when you're looking to classify your cortex color, these are the colors that you'll use. So down here, looking at these, I want you to take a minute and kind of decide how you would classify these. This one to me looks very kind of yellow, very maybe even orange. Looking at the cortex, we're not looking at the medulla, we're looking at the cortex, so this portion in between. This is kind of spotty. It doesn't even have a medulla, and it looks kind of red. So to me that one looks red. This is a very dark brown, maybe even a like red color when I'm looking at it, and those are the colors that I would go with. The cortex also has 3 pigment granule distributions, so it has smooth, granular, and spotty. Smooth pigment granules are not obvious, so and we'll look at more pictures. So here we're looking at the cortex again, so don't look at the medulla. So these dashes going down the center, that's the medulla. The cortex is out here. And then this one here is very granular, and then this one here is spotty. So we have smooth, granular, and spotty for our examples. So the pigment granules are not obvious, so it's very kind of evenly distributed, and there's not any like major color changes throughout the cortex. With this one, we have obvious pigment granules. It's very spotted. But it's kind of the same throughout. It's not very different throughout the cortex here. And then with this one, we have a very spotted cortex by it looks very smooth for a while, and then there'll be a nice big color change. And so that is your spotty cortex. The medulla is a layer of dead cells and the air space that runs down the center middle of your hair. Sorry, I had to get a drink. By looking through the microscope, you're going to be able to determine 3 things about your medulla: the medulla pattern, the medullary index, and the medulla color. So now we're specifically talking about the piece that runs up the center of your hair. So all of these things are found in that section. So to find the medulla pattern, you're going to scan the length of the hair. It's usually darker in color than your cortex, and there are 4 classifications. There's continuous, broken, spaced, and then absent. So continuous, broken, spaced, and absent. So here we have examples. So this one is spaced. This one here is continuous. See how it's all the way through? Then here we have absent. It's not there at all. And then this one is irregular. Or broken, sorry. Broken. I forgot the word for it. This is why you guys need to hold on to your notes, because there's no way to remember all this. I've been doing this for a while and I don't remember all this. So make sure you keep your notes organized in your binder. So the medullary index describes the thickness of the medulla layer that is present. To find the index, you have to look through the microscope in high power and choose the medullary index that best describes your hair's medulla. To find the index, look through the microscope in high power, choose the medullary index level that describes your hair's medulla. So your first one is like it's not present at all. And then your second one is it's about 1/8 the thickness of the hair.